only thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we burn, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
You find your way to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live, and it's Friday. That means it's Good News Friday, bringing you good news from around the nation. Give you a little bit of encouragement. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton and Tim Barton. Guys, I always love Friday. I love it when you guys tell me that what we're doing is actually working.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that is working. And you know what works really, really, really well is when people get involved. And the piece of good news that I want to start with is what has happened over the last 3 or so years with Common Core. People have really gotten involved, and there's been a turnaround in state after state after state as folks have gotten involved in that, which is good because Common Core is so stinking bad, and it's so bad for our kids, so bad for the country. It's purity, hardcore left indoctrination. It's not even neutral. And so to see the change, and I was just looking at some brand new polling numbers that are out, and the polling numbers are really of interest. Now, we're still at a point where about 52% of the nation doesn't know what Common Core is. And so for them, they don't know whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. But for the other folks who do know, man, it is overwhelmingly shifting to opposition to Common Core. And what we're seeing is that once people learn about it, they really get strongly opposed to it. And so, looking here at some polling numbers, we've got, here's an indication that, for example, among Republicans, and they did this for Republicans, and it says that among GOP parents, support for Common Core has plummeted in recent months. Only 19% of Republicans now view the standards favorably, and full 58% of all parents express their opposition to Common Core. So it's actually growing faster than I thought it was. I thought
And David, wasn't that, even a matter of a year and a half ago, even among Republicans?
Oh, it wasn't there.
There were still a lot of them for it.
That's right. It wasn't there. These are overwhelming numbers. And by the way, Bill and Melinda Gates and their foundation that they've been one of the chief funders of Common Core. But one thing you can say about Bill Gates is he's a smart businessman. He may have left-leaning agendas in many areas, but he is a smart businessman. And so he has made billions by making people happy because of what the market wants. Having said that, the Gates Foundation just did a survey of 1,600 teachers. And what they found in the survey is that teachers are souring on Common Core at a huge rate. Here's one example. Vanderbilt University reports that 56% of that state's teachers now express their disdain for Common Core. Now, last year it was only 39% who rejected Common Core. So you're up to 56% in a single year, and that's teachers. These are the ones that you would often think are associated with the educrats. So for teachers to now dislike it, you already have parents dislike it at huge amounts, but this thing is really gaining steam, and that is good news because it does show that when grassroots gets involved and gets passionate about something, they can change the entire nation. There still is not a national group out there opposed to Common Core in the sense of leading it. There's national groups opposed to it, but there's no national effort to do this. This is state by state, community by community, city by city, school district by school district. People are beating Common Core back in the bushes, and that's really good news. And by the way, for people who want information on it, if you're part of that 52% who haven't heard about it, go to the website haltcommoncore.com. Haltcommoncore.com. Lots of information if you don't know what Common Core is or what's wrong with it.
Guys, this might be, 5 years from now, we might be looking back at it. This might be the perfect case study on how an issue that, everybody would say the train had already left the station. It was already being implemented. Most people in both parties were for it. And yet the grassroots, as you were saying, were still the ones that stood up. And and were able to defeat it and change that momentum, and now the momentum's going the other way. So it's a great example of grassroots involvement.
And if I could throw one more thing out here, I would use this as a model of how you win wars, because one of the things that we see nationally is that as we, as citizens, listen to national news networks, I don't care whether it's Fox or CNN or MSNBC or whatever you listen to, if you have any concern for your nation, you get paralyzed by watching that news. Because we look and we say, the Supreme Court decided against marriage as one man and one woman. I can't overturn a decision of the Supreme Court. President Obama's done another executive order. I can't do anything about that. Harry Reid's got more than 300 bills from the House that he won't even touch. I can't make Harry Reid do that. And so we look at that and we end up doing nothing because we say it's bigger than me. And the cool thing was that in the American Revolution, when you had the Battle of Lexington and Yorktown and Bunker Hill and all these, nobody went to George Washington and said, General Washington, what do you want us to do? Everybody just stood up and got involved in their own community, said, hey, the British are coming to our community. We got to stop this. And all over the country, it was people standing up and taking care of their own backyard that got the revolution won. I mean, there's so many battles we had in the Revolution where you didn't have the major generals there because they couldn't get there. Transportation was too slow. Communication was too bad. It's just people who stepped up and did what they needed to do. And that's what Common Core is doing, and it's winning. And by the way, that's the way we as citizens should look at every single battle. Quit looking at the national level. Win the battles in your backyard, and as we win battles in backyards, nation, in community after community, that's what wins the nation back. And so Common Core is a great example of the way that we did things in the American Revolution and won.
Stay with us, folks. Going to take a quick break. Tim Barton's teeing up some good news for you. Don't miss it when we come back right here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. The key to a self-governing nation is self-governing people, and the key to personal self-government is to live by the standards in God's Word. If someone cannot control himself by those standards, then our Constitution certainly will be unable to restrain him. Understanding this, John Adams declared, "We have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Greed, ambition, revenge, or seduction would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." John Adams believed that successful government rested not upon our great Constitution, but rather upon moral and religious people.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn. Be thankful, people run. Raise a song of hope is born. All safely gathering.
And welcome back to WallBuilders Live. It's Good News Friday, and we're giving thanks today. 8 weeks from now will be Thanksgiving. We want to encourage you to be thinking about those things to be thankful for in your own home, your own community, and certainly as a nation as well.
Yeah, and it's a good time to remember God. I mean, you got to remember our first federal holiday that we had was Thanksgiving. That's what George Washington set aside back in 1789. This is the beginning holiday for the federal nation, was Thanksgiving. And so, and by the way, it was not a secular Thanksgiving. It was not a time when we said thank you to our families and enjoyed. It was a time to remember and honor God. And so we have that original 1789 Thanksgiving proclamation from George Washington posted on the website, wallbuilders.com. There's a Thanksgiving section there. You can see tons of Thanksgiving proclamations from across the generations in America to see how we've honored God. But just remember on Thursday, I mean, enjoy the time with the family, enjoy the day off, but remember to keep God center. And, you know, you'll get to see the games, Chicago Bears and Detroit and Eagles and Cowboys and Seahawks and 49ers, and that's all great. Just remember, this is a day we thank God for all the blessings we have.
Our Good News Friday programs, by the way, are available on the website at wallbuilderslive.com. If you like what you're hearing today and you want some more good news, go to the website there and click on Archives. And for several months back, you can grab those Friday programs and catch up on a lot of the good stuff that you're probably not hearing in the major media. We're here with Tim Barton and David Barton, and more good news from you guys. Tim, you're up.
All right, we're going to North Carolina. And North Carolina, interesting statistic coming out from North Carolina. we are seeing actually more kids are now homeschooling than are even in private schools in North Carolina, which is quite remarkable because just a few years ago, the homeschool community was not that big. In fact, it wasn't until the late 90s that homeschooling even was accepted in all 50 states. Some states you could not homeschool, you were not allowed to. And now homeschooling has become such a big deal. In North Carolina, there are more kids homeschooling than there are in private schools. So a growing trend. And of course, the good news is that we see the productivity, the level of what homeschooled students are able to do and able to accomplish on so many levels. So good news that we are seeing a growing trend, which usually also reflects in this homeschool community, that you have parents very concerned about their kids and what they're doing. The top three reasons that generally people homeschool is they're concerned either about the public school environment, or they want their kids to have more religious and moral instruction, or just simply the academic performance of public schools. And so whatever the case is,
or the academic non-performance of public schools.
That's exactly right. The lack of academic ability in public schools. And so we're seeing parents getting involved in their kids' lives directly, and kids now having more opportunities to achieve more, accomplish more, having that religious and spiritual connection. So some good news from North Carolina.
And really it's good news for everybody, because if the statistics continue, those students going through the homeschool system tend to learn better, tend to do better on all the tests and everything. So it's good for the whole country if you have more students in that environment where they're getting a better education and can be better, productive members of society and leaders later on.
Well, and that's exactly it. They will be leaders later on, because that's the next generation of soldiers and preachers and presidents and senators and newscasters and doctors and whatever it is. And, how many dozen studies do we need to present that shows homeschool kids are 2 to 4 grade levels higher academically than public school kids? And that's good for the nation, and that's no dissing of public school kids, but that is where public schools are right now with their poor academics.
And also that's not a diss even against public school teachers or administrators.
That's right.
Because we know a lot of great people that are working in public schools, but the reality is Jesus taught us that you judge a tree by its fruits. And you just measure what it produces. And it's only common sense that you want to do what works, that you want to do what is the most beneficial. And as a parent, well, my goodness, you want to do what is the best for your child. And if you're measuring fruits and statistically, public school is not what's the best for the kids, well, then ultimately I want to do what's best for my kids. And homeschooling right now is definitely meeting that. Now, obviously, there's also some great Christian schools and other things. However, the good news is that we are seeing parents that are now being so concerned with their kids' education, they are doing what is best for them. And that's always good news.
The common factor with so many private schools, 95% of private schools are religiously oriented. So you take the private school factor, and then you take that one of the three biggest reasons people homeschool is because they want more religious instruction for their kids. And you look at that, and I had a conversation with Dennis Prager, the national talk show host, and he's a really smart guy, really smart. Went to Columbia University, and he said at Columbia University he was so frustrated because he thought, how can these professors be so stupid? I mean, they keep saying such stupid stuff. It defies common sense. And he said he got it when he was reading through Proverbs, because Proverbs says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. He said, that's it. They don't fear God. These guys hate God. That's why they're so dumb, is that they hate God. And so he made the correlation that common sense knowledge, part of it comes from the right perspective toward God and toward faith and religion. And so now you've got all these growing numbers of folks that want the religious instruction. Lo and behold, the academic numbers go up as well. I wonder if there's a correlation to that. Well, public schools used to have high academic scores, but then they kicked God out. So, I mean, you could say it's not that simple. It's socioeconomic factors, it's demographic. Well, all right, maybe it is, but it still holds up. We've covered in this program before that we have now a number of studies that show the biggest factor in black academics rising in public schools is if they get religiously involved. Now, that's an interesting study. What does that do for your demographic, socioeconomic stuff? So, there's just so much out there. And this report from North Carolina on homeschooling, why people do it, and the higher academic scores. I mean, Tim said you got to judge a tree by its fruits, and this is what's working, and you're getting good results.
We've been doing this together too long, bro, because you're exactly what I was going to say. You read my mind. So it's the cultural positive and good news, because the more kids you have in an environment that has that religious foundation and has those values being taught, the more kids that get out of an environment that unfortunately our Supreme Court, not our teachers, our Supreme Court has forced us to make a secular place that has made learning harder. The more kids you get out of that environment into the homeschooling or the private schooling where the values are taught, the better for the culture. It's a big, big positive for not just those kids and those families, but for the whole country, because the more kids we can get learning in those values environment, the better leaders they're going to be, the better educated they're going to be, and the better it's going to be for the whole country. Got to take a quick break, guys. When we come back, we'll get some more good news. Stay with us right here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Around 1790, the infamous Thomas Paine wrote his Age of Reason, attacking religion and Christianity. Interestingly, one of the strongest defenders against Paine's attack was Benjamin Franklin. In fact, he stiffly rebuked Paine and told him, "He that spits in the wind spits in his own face." Do you imagine any good would be done by this attack against religion? Think how great a portion of mankind consists of youth who have need of the motives of religion to restrain them from vice, to support their virtue. I would advise you not to attempt unchaining the tiger, but to burn this piece before it is seen by any other person. If men are so wicked with religion, what would they be if without it? Benjamin Franklin believed that the practice of religion was one of the greatest assets of American society.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn. We gather together to ask the Lord's blessing. He chastens and hastens His will to make known. The wicked oppressing now cease from distressing. Sing praises to His name. He forgets not His own.
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. We're back on Good News Friday, bringing you good news from around the nation. And so far, we've had North Carolina. We've done a national issue, Common Core. What's next, guys?
We're going to another part of the United States. We're going to Puerto Rico. And yes, that is part of the United States.
Is that one of the 57 states?
That's right. That's one of the 57 states that the president visited. No.
Okay.
It's one of the American territories. And so an American territory, it operates under federal laws. It operates under federal judges. It is a territory of the United States. And in that territory, the federal judge there says, no, marriage between a man and a woman is absolutely right. We're not going to do homosexual marriage here. Puerto Rico doesn't have that, and we're not going to strike down the ban on homosexual marriage in Puerto Rico. And it's really significant to have a judge say that. And by the way, people keep hearing that the train has left the station. This thing is all over with homosexual marriage. It's a done deal. I got to point out, although homosexual marriage is now legal in 35 states in the District of Columbia, the people have only voted homosexual marriage legal in 4 states. The rest of it has been judges and other people. It hadn't been the people voting on it. It's been judges telling the people what they're going to do. So don't buy into the rhetoric that the train has left the station, because the numbers are still very strong. The numbers I saw last week on people who support marriage as a man and a woman is still somewhere between 59 to 62%, depending on which poll you see. So do not buy the brainwashing stuff that you're outnumbered, you're in the minority, you might as well change the way you think and act, because there's nothing you can do about it. The train has left us. It has not left the station. It has left the station with elitist, judicial activist judges. But here you got a judge in Puerto Rico that says no, and by the way, he dismissed the challenge with prejudice, which means they can't refile the case. This is not a case they can bring back and refile. He said, final word. That's it. The ban on homosexual marriage in Puerto Rico stands, and it's a great report. So that is a judge who did get it right.
Excellent. Good stuff. Tim?
Okay, well, this is actually a statistic related to the globe. The notion of global poverty, really interesting. New reports are coming out that identified global poverty has actually been declining. Specifically, when you look at extreme poverty, it's decreased by more than half over the last 30 years, which is very significant because 67% of Americans actually believed that global poverty hasn't decreased, but in fact has been rising. But extreme poverty has decreased over the last 30 years by more than half, which is astounding because even though malnutrition and starvation and so many things are very significant around the world, we're down by more than half from what it was 30 years ago. That's pretty remarkable.
Well, that's pretty remarkable considering the fact that they're reporting that poverty is up in the United States. So the rest of the world is going down in poverty, and America is going up in poverty. Let's see if I can get this right. America is going up in poverty. The rest of the world is going down in poverty. And among the poor in America, 99% reported they did not go to bed hungry one day in the last year. So, and the number one.
But if we're poor, the obvious solution is we need to move to some of these other third world nations that are not as poor.
Yeah, exactly.
We could really improve our circumstances if we move to, what's a good third world nation?
Bangladesh.
Absolutely.
There
Let's go to Bangladesh.
Was there anything in it that talked about why or how or
No, the perception, it did not give the details of the breakdown of why over the last 30 years it has changed. Although you have more nations that are becoming industrialized.
And more free market nations, by the way. You look at
more
the rise
have adopted capitalism.
That's right. More free market nations. I mean, you look at South Korea now in the last 15 years. My gosh, they're the size of New Jersey. They're now the 10th most powerful economic nation in the world. You know, that's a massive thing. And so you look at all these, Singapore's emerging. What's happened in China is they've adopted free market principles. They're still communist, but not like the old communists. They've decided free market does work. So
so even in these nations that are pseudo-capitalist, at least they've got some free market principles that have made it better.
That's right. And there it is again. You judge a tree by its fruits, except in America, when we and the Texas Standard said that we want to teach free market economic principles, we had the professors come to the state capitol and protest that. And now you look at the AP U.S. history test that's being done by Common Core Standards out of the College Board, and there is no mention of free enterprise, of entrepreneurship, of the middle class, or of the free market economy. They've dropped that. I mean, it works for everybody else, and that's why we're running away from it, because it worked for us and we don't want it to work.
Well,
it's
because it's caused us to go into so much poverty in America.
Yeah, that's
we
right.
now have more people on food stamps than ever before.
Yeah, that's right.
Because of, no. Because even the people in poverty in America, more likely to have a telephone, television, more likely to have their own vehicle, eat more red meat, have more square footage of living space than the middle class in the second wealthiest place on the world. It's unbelievable. But we've bought in this notion of poverty, which we've pointed out on this program many times before, the way we define poverty a little different than the way the rest of the world defines poverty.
The rest of the world the World Bank defines poverty as $1.25 income a day, and if you're in a developing nation, $2 a day, which is $730 a year, is poverty. And in America, we define it as $40,000 for a family of four. That's a little bit different from the world standards.
Yeah,
so
that's just a little bit different.
A little bit, and that's why, as Tim points out, if you live in poverty in America, your lifestyle is higher than the middle class in Europe, as the poor in America. So this deal about we've got to fight poverty in America. Sorry, what we're doing is fighting the middle class in Europe because we're higher than that level in our poverty level.
Well, in this free market system in America that has quote unquote led us to poverty. Actually, if you look at the rest of the world, the number one issue for the rest of the world, the third world nations or nations that would be below the poverty line, the number one problem for the poor people of those nations is malnutrition. That's the number one thing they deal with. Well, if you look at the number one health concern for the people in poverty in America, the number one health concern is obesity. Because we have too much saturated fat food, which AKA is McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts and those kind of places. That's our poverty in America. Well, what an incredible problem to have that our free market has produced is that the problem for the poor people of America is we have too much food as opposed to the rest of the world who doesn't get enough.
And by the way, in the book that George Barton and I just did together called U-Turn, we document in there that food stamps, you can now redeem your food stamps at Red Lobster. You can now redeem your food stamps at Kentucky Fried Chicken. You can now redeem food stamps at all these places. And that's food stamps in America, and we don't have the requirement for food stamps anymore. We've opened it up to essentially anybody that wants to be on it, including with no work requirements at all. So I want to be on food stamps so I can go to Red Lobster all the time. I mean, that's poverty in America. But as Tim points, even real poverty, genuine poverty outside of America, across the rest of the world, is plummeting. And we still think that we're responsible for the rest of the world's poor performance in America.
And I can imagine why we haven't heard this statistic that real poverty has been cut in half is because there's no politician and government program that can take credit for it. It's actually been free, like you were saying, free market principles that have allowed that to happen. It's not some federal bureaucratic program. So we've got a little bit of time left. I hope one of you guys has a quick good news for us today.
Real quick, we can go to Massachusetts. There was just a ruling where the American Humanist Association had tried to sue a school saying they cannot say the Pledge of Allegiance in school because it mentions under God. Well, the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty got involved, and they actually won this case. The judge ruled that the American Humanist Association was using a heckler's veto, and that was not allowed. And so, Fortunately for all the kids in Massachusetts, they are allowed to choose to say the pledge if they would like to, including under God.
Wow. In Massachusetts, a federal judge. Well, speaking of federal judges, let's jump down to Oklahoma. And from Massachusetts, from Texas, let's jump up to Oklahoma, I guess. But let's jump over to Oklahoma. And in Oklahoma, a federal judge there ruled that the legislature of Oklahoma can keep the Ten Commandments monument on their grounds after the Supreme Court gave the victory to the Texas Ten Commandments in the case Perry versus Van Orden. Then other states such as Oklahoma said, well, we want to do it too. And so they put up Ten Commandments on the Capitol grounds there in Oklahoma, and the federal judge ruled that was fine. So we're getting some good rulings out of some courts, the Puerto Rico judge and the Massachusetts judge and the Oklahoma judge, and I'm sure there'll be more to come, but that's good news from federal courts occasionally too.
Man, guys, what a great day. Good news from the courts, good news on a major national issue and where that's going, good news on local issues, just good news across the board. Folks, you want some more good news, visit our website at wallbuilderslive.com. Click on the archive section and go to those Friday programs. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting.